Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Chapter 4, Transcendental Knowledge. Text 22. Iradachalabha sanushto dvandvaitito vimatsara samasita ashito cha kritvapi nanibhatyate.
He who is satisfied with gain, which comes of its own accord, who is free from duality and does not envy, who is steady in both success and failure, is never entangled, although performing actions.
Text 23. Gata sangasya muktasya jnana vashtita chetasha yagna yacharata charatata karma samagram praviliyate.
The work of a man who is unattached to the modes of material nature and who is fully satisfied in transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence.
Text 24. Brahmarpanan Brahma Havir Brahmagno Brahmana Hutam Brahmaevatena Gantavyam Brahma Karma Samadhina.
A person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities, in which the consumption is absolute and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature.
Text 25. Devam evapare yagnam yogina paryupasate brahmagna apare yagnam yagne nevo pachuvati.
Some yogis perfectly worship the demigods by offering different sacrifices to them, and some of them offer sacrifices in the fire of the Supreme Brahman.
Text 26. Shrotradinina Triyanani Anye Samyamagnishu Pchuvati Sabdadin Vishyayan Anya Indriyagnishu Chuvati.
Some, the unadulterated brahmacharis, sacrifice the hearing process and the sense in the fire of mental control, and others, the regulated householders, sacrifice the object of the senses in the fire of the senses.
Text 27. Sarvanindriya Karmani Prana Karmani Chapare Atma Samyama Yogagno Chuvati Jnana Dipite.
Others, who are interested in achieving self-realization through control of mind and senses, offer the functions of all the senses and of the life breath as oblation into the fire of the controlled mind.
Text 28. Ravya Yagnas Tapo Yagna Yoga Yagnas Tathapare Swadhyaya Jnana Yajnascha Yataha Samsita Vrataha.
Having accepted strict vows, some become enlightened by sacrificing their possessions, and others by performing severe austerities, by practicing the yoga of eightfold mysticism, or by studying the Vedas to advance in transcendental knowledge.
Text 29. Apane Juvati Pranam Pranepya Nam Tathapare Pranapana Kati Rudva Pranayama Parayana Apare Niyata Tahara Pranan Praneshu Juvati.
Still others who are inclined to the process of breath restraint to remain in trance, practice by offering the moment of the outgoing breath into the incoming and the incoming breath into the outgoing, and thus at last remain in trance, stopping all breathing. Others, curtailing the eating process, offer the outgoing breath into itself as a sacrifice.
Text 30. Sarvepi ete yagna vido yagna shapita kalmashaha yagna shishtamrita pucho yanti brahma sanatanam.
All these performers who know the meaning of sacrifice become cleansed of sinful reactions, and having tasted the nectar of results of sacrifice, they advance towards the supreme eternal atmosphere.
Text 31. Nayam lokosti ayagnashya kutonyaha guru sattama.
O best of the Kuru dynasty, without sacrifice, one can never live happily on this planet or in this life. What then of the next?
Text 32. Evam bahuvida yagna vitata brahmano mukhe karma jan viditan sarvan evam natva vimokshase.
All these different types of sacrifices are approved by the Vedas, and all of them are born of different types of work. Knowing them as such, you will become liberated.
Text 33. Shreyandravya mayad yagnaj jnana yagna parantapa sarvam karma khilam partha jnane parisham samapyate.
O chastiser of the enemy, the sacrifice performed in knowledge is better than the mere sacrifice of material possessions. After all, O son of Pratha, all sacrifices of work culminate in transcendental knowledge.
Text 34. Tadviti pranipatena pariprashenena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnananis tattvadarshina.
Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth.
Text 35. Yajnatva na punar mohan evam yajyasi pandava yena bhutani aseshani drakshyasi atmani athomai.
Having obtained real knowledge from a self realized soul, you will never fall again into such illusion. For by this knowledge, you will see that all living beings are but part of the Supreme, or in other words, they are mine.
Text 36. Apiched asi papebhya sarvebhya papa krittamaha sarvam jnana plavenaiva richinam santarishyasi.
Even if you are considered to be the most sinful of all sinners, when you are situated in the boat of transcendental knowledge, you will be able to cross over the ocean of miseries.
Text 37. Yathaidam shi samitognir pasmasat kurute chuna jnanagni sarva karmani pasmasat kurute tatha.
As a blazing fire turns firewood to ashes, O Arjun, so does the fire of knowledge burn the ashes to ashes all the reactions of material activities.
Text 38. Nahi nanena sadrusham pavitram iha vidyate tatsakshayam yoga samshida kalenatmani vindati.
In this world, there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Such knowledge is the mature fruit of all mysticism, and one who has become accomplished in the practice of devotional service enjoys this knowledge within himself in due course of time.
Text 39. Shraddhaval labhate jnanam tatpara samyat tendriyaha jnanam labdva param chantim archirendra gidachati.
A faithful man who is dedicated to transcendental knowledge and who subdues his senses is eligible to achieve such knowledge, and having achieved it, he quickly attains the supreme spiritual pace.
Text 40. Agnascha srada datanascha samshayatma vinashyati nayam lokosti na paro na sukham samsayatmana.
But ignorant and faithless person who doubt the revealed scriptures do not attain God consciousness. They fall down. For the doubting soul, there is happiness neither in this world nor in the next.
Text 41. Yoga sanyasa karmanam jnana sanchina samshrayam atmavantam nagar karmani naivatananti tananjaya.
One who acts in devotional service, renouncing the fruits of his action, and whose doubts have been destroyed by transcendental knowledge, is situated factually in the self. Thus, he is not bound by the reactions of work, O conqueror of riches.
Text 42. Tasmad ajnana sambhutam ritshitam jnanasi natmanaha chitvenam samshayan yogam atishto bharata.
Therefore, the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga, or O Bharata, stand and fight. Hare Krishna. Please forgive my mistakes.
Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purpose to the fourth chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of transcendental knowledge. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ashwini Mataji, for stepping in and saving the day. And same to Sima Mataji. So welcome, dear devotees, to today's session. It's been a while since I've been facilitating, so I hope everyone's well and everything's going on nicely. So we'll continue with chapter number 4, entitled Transcendental Knowledge. And today we will be discussing in more detail text number 33. So before we do, we shall recite the Mangala Charanam prayers. So please feel free to join in behind muted mics also. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmalitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yata Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutan Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gourange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sati Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyasya Kripa Sindhu Bhivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivashari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschacha Deshatarine Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Today's verse, text number 33. Shreyan Dravya Mayad Yagnad Jnana Yagna Parantapa Sarvam Karma Kilam Partha Jnane Parisamappyate. Word for word synonyms. Shreyan, greater. Dravya Mayat, of material possessions. Yagnat, then the sacrifice. Jnana Yagya, sacrifice in knowledge. Parantapa, O chastiser of the enemy. Sarvam, all. Karma, activities. Akilam, in totality. Partha, O son of Pritha. Yane, in knowledge. Parisama, samapyate, end. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. O chastiser of the enemy, the sacrifice performed in knowledge is better than the mere sacrifice of material possessions. After all, O son of Pritha, all sacrifices of work culminate in transcendental knowledge. Purport. The purpose of all sacrifice is to arrive at the status of complete knowledge, then to gain release from material miseries, and ultimately to engage in loving transcendental service to the Supreme Lord, Krishna consciousness. Nonetheless, there is a mystery about all these different types of sacrifice, and one should know this mystery. Sacrifices sometimes take different forms according to the particular faith of the performer. When one's faith reaches the stage of transcendental knowledge, the performer of sacrifices should be considered more advanced than those who simply sacrifice material possessions without such knowledge. For without attainment of knowledge, sacrifices remain on the material platform and bestow no spiritual benefit. Real knowledge culminates in Krishna consciousness, the highest stage of transcendental knowledge. Without the elevation of knowledge, sacrifices are simply material activities. When, however, they are elevated to the level of transcendental knowledge, all such activities enter onto the spiritual platform. Depending on differences in consciousness, sacrificial activities are sometimes called karma kanda, fruit of activities, and sometimes jnana kanda, knowledge in the pursuit of truth. It is better when the end is knowledge. So the verse again, O chastiser of the enemy, The sacrifice performed in knowledge is better than the mere sacrifice of material possessions. After all, O son of Pritha, all sacrifices of work culminate in transcendental knowledge. So just to quickly put this section we're discussing into context. So this section, this chapter, chapter number 4, is broken up essentially into 5 main sections. The first section we've been discussing is transcendental knowledge about Krishna, and there we discussed about how such knowledge is received through disciplic succession, how Krishna will reveal the truth about his form, and once knowing this or having this knowledge, the result is we take shelter of Krishna. Then we discussed in verses 11 to 15 how to apply transcendental knowledge, taking it to a practical level. And then we discussed understanding karma on the platform of Gyan. That's discussing how karma and jnana, how actually work can be seen as knowledge. An interesting section. And in this section, it's quite a long section from text number 25 to 33. And the section, the verse we're doing today is the culmination of this section. Our sacrifices lead to transcendental knowledge. So we spoke it previously. When we say transcendental knowledge, what do we mean? We mean spiritual understanding. So Krishna has described various types of sacrifices in text number 25 and 28 and 29. There is demigod worship, there is Brahman worship, there is mind control, there is sense enjoyment, that means sacrificing sense enjoyment, there is sacrifice in terms of self-control, there's sacrifice in terms of giving in charity, there's sacrifices in terms of austerity, there's sacrifices in terms of yogic mysticism, there's sacrifice in terms of scriptural study, and then there is sacrifices in terms of the eightfold yogic system. But what is the ultimate purpose of all of these types of sacrifice? The Prabhupada gives us some insight in the purport. In the first few lines, Prabhupada writes that the purposes of all sacrifice, and Prabhupada writes 3 reasons there. One is to achieve complete knowledge. 2 is to gain release from material desires. And 3 is to engage in loving transcendental service to the Supreme Lord. So if one performs any types of sacrifice, as we've just been listing out, as set out by the Lord in text 25, 26, 27, 28, and 29, if sacrifices do not lead us to these 3 points here, then the sacrifices we can understand are bearing no fruit, or no real fruit. Srila Prabhupada then talks about the mystery behind all sacrifices. Now, this is an interesting statement. So why does Prabhupada say there's a mystery behind sacrifices? When Prabhupada sets out himself there, he said, firstly, we see that there are different types of sacrifices, different forms of sacrifices, people with different types of faith performing sacrifices. And Prabhupada says sacrifice with knowledge is better. And sacrifice without knowledge is material. So it's a mystery in the sense that many people talk about sacrifices, many people perform sacrifices, but very few people do it with proper knowledge and without proper attainment of the goal. Therefore, it's a mystery. The Vedic literatures advocate many, many types of sacrifices. And we know from our lives, we were maybe in some point in our life performing some sort of sacrifice without really knowing it. Some of us may have known it, but many of us were either performing it out of duty, out of custom, or with some lower motive. But fortunately for us, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is saying so clearly, one cannot miss it, that the purpose of sacrifice should ultimately culminate in transcendental knowledge. And what is the pinnacle of transcendental knowledge? Is the understanding that I am servant of Krishna and my duty is to serve Krishna. That is the perfection of all sacrifices. And if one has performed sacrifice, truly one will come to this point. It will come to this point of understanding what is sacrifice. So in the 5th chapter, 29th verse, there is it's a very famous verse. Bhakta Ram Yagya Tapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram Suridam Sarva Bhutanam Yatva Mam Shantim Richati. Where Krishna says he is Bhakta. He is the beneficiary of all yagyas, sacrifice. And actually, this is the position of Krishna. Krishna is just waiting for us. Krishna is saying, I am here. I am just waiting for you to offer me your sacrifice. And I'm just waiting to accept it. And when I accept your sacrifice, there's a connection that develops between the two of us. Firstly, you awaken your real nature. And then secondly, Krishna says, I am happy. And when Krishna becomes happy, what happens? Shantim Richati. One becomes free of all material pangs. But many people, although Krishna is saying in the Gita, I'm just waiting here, waiting to accept your sacrifice. People say, no, Krishna, sorry. I'm not interested in offering a sacrifice to you. I'm not interested in offering a sacrifice for you. I will offer some sacrifice to see how I can be benefited, to see how I can attain a better position for myself. You can carry on waiting, Krishna. You want my sacrifice, but no. And this, unfortunately, is the position of all people besides the devotees of the Lord. They're offering sacrifices, but they are not interested in accepting, giving it to Krishna. And because of this, the living entities always suffer, always suffering. But the moment we turn to Krishna and to say, Krishna, yes. Now in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, it's very clear. I've heard. I have heard that you are Bhaktaram. You are the beneficiary of all sacrifices. You are the beneficiaries of all penance and austerities. And you are Maha Ishwaram, the Supreme Lord. You are Suridam, the benefactor of all living entities. So you are the ultimate beneficiary of any sacrifice. And when we come to this position, then everything becomes perfect. Everything becomes perfect. So in one sense, it is so simple that what Krishna is telling us. Krishna says, I am the beneficiary. You offer me sacrifices. And when you do such things, then what happens? Krishna becomes pleased. Krishna reveals transcendental knowledge. We've said in the past, transcendental knowledge can never be achieved. True spiritual understanding can never ever be achieved. It can only be received. And as Krishna said before, it cannot be achieved by tapasya. It cannot be achieved by jnana kanda. It cannot be achieved by karma kanda. Only by bhakti it can be achieved. So this is the purpose of sacrifice. Sacrifice should lead to transcendental knowledge or spiritual understanding. And only when sacrifice is directed towards Krishna, only when Krishna is pleased, then spiritual understanding is revealed to us from within the heart. And this is the simple message of this whole section of Bhagavad Gita about sacrifices. In fact, it seems so simple when we talk about it, isn't it? It's like so simple that Krishna is saying it so directly. And yet, for so many lifetimes, we've been stubbornly and obstinately refusing to accept these words of Krishna, thinking we know better, or our real happiness lies in satisfying some demigods through sacrifice, performing some austerities for some other purpose. And therefore, Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita is so wonderful. It's so clear. You cannot miss it. And lastly, Prabhupada talks about the two divisions of sacrificial activities. Now, some examples of this. Who can think of some examples, either in the pastimes of the Lord, or let's look in the pastimes of the Lord, where they embarked on the path of sacrifice, but they completely missed the plot. Anyone can think about it? Some examples from Srimad Bhagavatam. The example that always comes to mind for me is the pastimes of the wives of the Brahmanas. The pastime of the wives of the Brahmanas. So the Brahmanas, they were performing a sacrifice. And they had a big yagya. And they were all highly learned, highly qualified. And they were putting ghee into the fire. And then they were chanting mantras. And they were very engrossed in the sacrifice. And they had made big endeavors to set up the yagyas and so on. And yet, when Krishna and Balarama asked them for some food, what did they do? They ignored them. They chased them. And Prabhupada says, how foolish were these Brahmanas? They did not even know that the fire in the yagya is known as the mouth of Vishnu. They were putting ghee into the mouth of Vishnu and the fire. But when Krishna appeared in front of them and asked them to put in a more personal way food into their mouths, they refused. So here we see an example of someone who's performing sacrifice, but it does not culminate in devotional service. It does not culminate in transcendental knowledge, because the culmination of all knowledge, transcendental knowledge, is to engage in the loving devotional service of Krishna. That is the culmination of transcendental knowledge. And yet those same wives of the Brahmanas, who the Brahmanas considered to be less intelligent, less qualified themselves, when they were approached to offer some food to Krishna and Balaram, they ran. When they saw Krishna and Balaram, it's described in the Bhagavatam, they became intoxicated with looking at Krishna and Balaram. They were just drinking in the beauty of Krishna and Balaram. And they did their utmost to offer Krishna and Balaram the best types of foodstuffs. So the wives of the Brahmanas, they achieved the highest stage or the highest result that one can ever obtain through a sacrifice. They attained it. And they attained the stage of loving devotional service. So this is the message of the Bhagavad Gita. We should not be sidetracked. And if any time we are asked to perform some sacrifice, either by other people, we should know what Bhagavad Gita says. And we should be bold enough to tell the people that your sacrifice, unless it can culminate in loving service to Krishna, then it's of no use. So maybe what's the time now? It's 8:31. I think I should stop here. And I'll take any reflections, questions, or comments by anyone. Anyone's got?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for a wonderful class. So the other example that comes to mind is when the Brajbasis were offering their sacrifice to Indra. But this time they actually heard the Lord, they listened to the Lord, and so the result was totally different.
Yes, Emma Mataji, that's another very good example. But you can see the Brajbasis, Nanda Maharaj, he was thinking, oh, I should perform it for Indra. But moment Krishna says no, they immediately accepted Krishna's words, and they performed the puja of Govardhan Hill. That's a nice example. Thank you for that, Emma Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranams.
Hare Krishna, Shailaja Mataji.
Prabhuji, I have one confusion. So when Vidura was actually taking Krishna from Vrindavan to Mathura, he goes for the Sandhya Vandan in the evening. And even though the Lord was sitting on the chariot right with him, Vidura did not choose to offer the prayers to Krishna, the Supreme Lord, right where he was sitting, but rather he goes to the water or the lake, wherever he takes kind of a shower or whatever, washes his feet, and then he sits for the prayers, and then he offers, because that is the way prescribed in Shastra. And even though the Lord comes in front, it was prescribed that they do the duties in the way it is prescribed in the Shastras and not otherwise. That is one. Another thing was, I remember during the Shraddha ceremony, wherein I'm really sorry, I don't remember the names in particular, It may be Dasharatha Maharaj or somebody, but then he actually appears, in his personal form, holding his hand for the food. And even his, I think half of the body is also visible, wherein he's asking to take the, the sacrifice, Shraddha sacrifice in person, but then it is not advised to give it in the hand, but then it was supposed to be, dropped in the kusha, dharba, whatever, wherever the seats it is supposed to be put on to. The reason being, even though the person appears, but we have to do that in the way it is performed. So these are the two questions at the back of my mind when I asked this question. The reason why the Brahmanas did not offer this to Krishna, the background was being, it is told in the Shastras that before we complete the fire sacrifice, we should not offer that to anybody. And they were actually, it's not that they did not want to give to Krishna or Balaram, but then they were afraid and confused on this is how it is described in the Shastras, and can we do that without the fire sacrifice is completed? Can we give the food to Krishna and his friends? And they were confused and they did not want to say anything, and they just ended up continuing the thing. So this was a bit confusing, or rather the conflicting messages. So how should we go about that? Sorry for my long question.
You spoke about 3 pastimes in your question, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, Prabhuji.
First one is the pastimes of the Brahmanas feeding Krishna. The second one is, it wasn't Vidura, I think you're referring to Akrura.
Right, Akrura, sorry. Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Yeah, you're referring to the pastime of Akrura. And then lastly, I think you're referring to a pastime of Maharaj Dasharatha, is it?
I think so, Prabhuji. I don't remember the names exactly, but someone who appeared to accept the Shraddha sacrifice. The father came to accept that from the son, and the son was told not to give it in the hand.
Okay, I'm not so familiar with that pastime, so I may not be able to comment on it.
Yeah.
But let me just speak maybe about the point you make about the Brahmanas, that they were just following what was right, and that the right thing to do is one should not offer anything to someone until you've completed the yajna. Otherwise, the yajna becomes spoiled. I think that's what you were referring to.
Right, Prabhuji.
Yeah, you're right. So there's 2 types of dharma. There is the normal dharma, and then there's the paro dharma, the highest dharma. The highest dharma is to please Krishna. The normal dharma takes a lower position than the highest dharma. So in the case of the Brahmanas, they should have understood that what is the ultimate purpose of the sacrifice they're performing. Even if they performed it perfectly, what is the purpose of what they're performing?
To please the Lord.
To please the Lord, right? And by performing the yajna perfectly, but at the same time displeasing their Lord, have they achieved anything? No. So one must see what is the ultimate purpose, what is the ultimate good. Even this verse, there is the word, I think it's in this word, Shreya. Shreya is ultimate good. Prayers is immediate good. So bhakti means we are always doing the ultimate good. Whatever pleases Krishna, even we know in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, Krishna asked Yudhishthira to speak a lie, to say that Ashwatthama is dead. He was very hesitant because he was more concerned about normal dharma, not concerned so much about, because what is real dharma? The real dharma is that which comes from the Lord. So that is the one point. And the second point is about Akrura. Although he maybe have been performing some externally, some types of karma kanda sacrifices, his ultimate goal, his mind and his absorption, actually Akrura was just, he couldn't wait to see Krishna and Balaram. His ultimate purpose in whatever he was doing is let it facilitate, let it help me, let it clear the way for me to see Krishna and Balaram and receive Krishna and Balaram in the best way. So bhakti triumphs everything, Mataji. And bhakti means that which is expressively we know to be Krishna's desire as given by the Shastra, the Gurus, and the Vaishnavas. That is the ultimate sacrifice. The ultimate sacrifice we can give is to offer ourselves completely to Krishna, to offer everything that we have for the pleasure of Krishna. This is the ultimate sacrifice. And this is what Bhagavad Gita is ultimately teaching us. So in anything, even if it seems like a devotee is externally, performing something, we should know what is the mind of the devotee. It's ultimately is to please Krishna, is to reach Krishna. If anyone else likes to add, maybe you'll know a bit more about the pastime, the third pastime Mataji spoke about. Please feel free to comment.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Just a small dot on the extension to Mataji's question. So, like Krishna put everyone into illusion, no, Prabhuji. Like even Mother Yashoda, when she saw the universe, in 1 second she saw the universe, but in another second Krishna put mother in illusion again, so that she'll give that motherly love and don't treat Krishna as a god. So now we know that Krishna is a god because we are not in that pastime. I mean, we are out of that pastime now. So, but being in the pastime and being put into illusion by Krishna, so how Brahmanas could actually understand that it is Krishna and we have to actually sacrifice should be offered to Krishna directly? How that is possible, Prabhuji, in that time then?
Well, there's two types of Maya. There is Mahamaya and there's Yoga Maya. Yoga Maya is the type of Maya that covers the devotees in terms of them not seeing that Krishna is God. So the pure devotees, like the Vrajavasis, they are under Yoga Maya. That is Maya of a completely different nature. That Maya is there to facilitate Leela, the pastimes between the Lord and the devotees. Then there is Mahamaya. That is the Maya, the type of Maya that we are under, where we forget the position of Krishna. We think that we are the controllers or some demigod is the controller. That is Mahamaya. The Brahmanas who refused to feed Krishna, they were not under Yoga Maya. They were under Mahamaya, the material nature, because they were so much engrossed in the Karma Kanda section, meaning performing sacrifices only for their own material benefit. So it's just like us. If we are not in the proper consciousness, if one day Krishna comes and knocks on our door and begs for some alms, we will not recognize Krishna. We will not recognize Krishna. But if we are devotees of Krishna, our eyes are tinged with the salve of love. Even if Krishna comes completely disguised, immediately we will know it is Krishna. Immediately we know it is Krishna. Like the wives of the Brahmanas. Immediately they knew this is Krishna and Balaram. But the Brahmanas, because they didn't have bhakti, although they were so advanced in Vedic sacrifices, because they had no bhakti, they couldn't recognize who Krishna and Balaram really were, and they turned them away. Does that make sense to you, Prabhu?
Yeah, very nice, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, that is why I think Kauravas could not understand, like Duryodhana could not understand, Arjuna could understand.
Yes.
Yeah, nice, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, one more question if I can ask.
Uh-huh.
Sorry. So when we just talk about the action and the reaction, the karma and the karmic reaction, something that comes to us without our effort, something that's just manifesting is the reaction for which we would have already performed the action in any of the previous lives. But then sometimes in a situation, we may be the actor, the person who is acting, karmi. Say for instance, someone might steal something from me. That's an action that they've performed. And when they've stolen something from me, I am on the reacting side. I may choose to either forgive them. I may go to the extent of escalating that, or probably, file a case with the police, etc. And that's the reaction for their action. But then that reaction, when it comes to me on the reaction side, I may choose to act either of the ways. And when I act in a certain way without knowing what was the destiny or something, and when I choose it from my side, for the other person on the receiving side, for them it's a destiny. They may think that, okay, so maybe my destiny is for me to go to the police station, to go to jail, etc. Or if I choose to forgive them, they may think that, thank God, my destiny is, it did not have something like that. So even though I've stolen something really big, I'm rescued. So when we are in that chain, so how do we recognize? And when we are on the receiving side especially, how do we know whether we are acting or we are taking the destiny? Or things are coming to us, manifesting us as it is already planned in the destiny?
It's very difficult to know. The laws of material nature of reaction and action is very difficult to unravel. But by the mercy of Krishna, so a devotee, he doesn't waste time. He sees every reaction as the mercy of Krishna or the result of his, and we just tolerate it. So in one sense, it's the gist of what I'm trying to say, it's very difficult to unravel. We shouldn't waste time trying to unravel. Everything that happens to us, we should either take it as the reactions of our karma, but having surrendered to Krishna, Krishna says he removes all reactions. And if we are getting some reactions, it's simply the mercy of Krishna trying to purify us some way. So that's my simple answer, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Trying to understand, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Thank you. Madhvi Mataji, you had yourself unmuted. You wanted to ask a question?
Yes, Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Satyanarayana.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Then we'll Pranam. All goes to Srila Prabhupada. Yes, earlier on Mataji mentioned that according to scripture, no one should be served before fire sacrifice or yagya ceremony finish.
Yes.
But first thing is we have to understand yagya ceremony or fire sacrifice, whom we are doing it for.
Yes.
Because whatever offering we do, we offering in a Lord Vishnu's mouth.
Yes.
Right? Lotus mouth. And Lord Vishnu and Krishna are not different.
Yes.
So when Krishna is present physically and asking, I mean Krishna and Balaram, so why we have to wait?
Yes, absolutely, Prabhu.
Right. Second thing is rules and regulations are created by Krishna, right?
Yes.
But they are not. But they do not apply to Krishna and Balaram. That's for us.
Yes. True. They can come in at any time and say,
Yeah.
"Oh, yeah, you're performing the yagya, but I, just offer it to me."
Yeah.
They can
Now, in some cases, Krishna has followed some rules, but that is only to teach us.
Yes. Yes.
Not he had to follow.
That's true, Prabhu. Good point.
So there's I wanted to mention. So in that case, what we saw, that Krishna and Balaram's position is the highest position.
Yes.
Nobody is equal to them. Nobody is above them.
True.
Then there is nothing left.
That's true. Okay, Prabhu. Thank you so much for that. We were supposed to have a bhajan sung by Namrata Mataji today. Am I right?
Yes, Prabhuji.
What are you singing for us, Namrata Mataji?
I am singing Singing the bhajan Jai Radhe, Jai Krishna, Jai Vrindavan.
All right. Since we've sort of gone over time now, I would still say start as soon as you're ready.
Okay, Prabhuji, before I just start, Hare Krishna, Hari Bol, my humble obeisances to all the devotees, and a massive thanks to Santosh Mataji for all the hard work and all the practice she's made me do. So a massive, massive thanks to Santosh Mataji. Okay.
Okay. That's wonderful. He's been preparing you.
Yes, yes, Prabhuji, yes. Okay.
All right. So you can.
Jai Radhe, Jai Krishna, Jai Vrindavan, Rasika Mukuta Mani, Jai Gopika. Rasika Mukuta Mani, Jai Gopika. Radhe 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 Shyam, Radhe Shyam Yugal Naam Mero hai. Radhe Shyam Yugal Naam Mero hai. Oh Jai Radhe, Jai Krishna, Jai Vrindavan, Rasika Mukuta Mani, Jai Gopi. Rasika Mukuta Mani, Jai Gopi. Mera Jiva, Nanda Nandana Madana Mohan Radhika Rama. Oh Nanda Madana Mohan Radhika Rama. Oh Jaya Radhe, Jai Krishna, Jai Vrindavan, Rasika Mukuta Mani, Jaya Govinda. Rasika Mukuta Mani, Jaya Govinda. Shyamai tumero pyaro, Shyamai to vardhan. Shyamai to ayo aatho yamatan. Oh Shyamai to ayo aatho yamatan. Oh Jaya Radhe, Jaya Krishna, Jai Vrindavan, Rasika Mukuta Mani, Jaya Gopi. Rasika Mukuta Mani, Jaya Gopi. मैं तो हूँ वही साचारी राधे रानी की. मैं तो हूँ वही साचारी राधे रानी की. नित्यधाम वृंदावन महारानी की. ओ नित्यधाम वृंदावन महारानी. महारानी की. नित्यधाम वृंदावन महारानी. Oh Jai Radhe, Jai Krishna, Jai Vrindavan, Rasika Mukuta Mani, Jaya Gopi. Rasika Mukuta Mani, Jaya Gopi. Rakuruchi soi joi Thakurani ki. Oh Rakuruchi soi joi Thakurani ki. Oh Jaya Radhe, Jai Krishna, Jai Vrindavan, Rasika Mukuta Mani, Jaya Gopi. Rasika Mukuta Mani, Jaya Gopi. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Beautiful. Wonderful. Jai. Maybe you'd want to read the translation of the screen for us too?
Yeah, sure, Prabhuji, yeah. All glories to Sri Radha, all glories to Sri Krishna, all glories to the abode of Vrindavana. All glories to the gopis who are the jewel of the crown of the Rasika mood. In this ecstatic mood, Krishna sings Radhe Radhe and Radha sings Shyam Shyam. The holy name and the divine pair of Radhe Shyam are my life and soul. I only have one treasure within this life, the son of Nanda Maharaja, the enchanter of Cupid and pleasure giver to Radharani are my life and soul. Shyama is the only person who I love. He's certainly my husband. My mind and body is perpetually immersed in Shyama. I'm verily the maid servant of Srimati Radharani, who is the eternal queen of the eternal abode of Vrindavan. My wish to obtain a daily practice of doing eternal service in the eternal abode. Thus I wish to keep my life in the way my master Srimati Radharani desires.
Jai.
Hare Krishna, Hare Bol.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Namrata Mataji.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Your wonderful singing and your mood of devotion. So we'll conclude today's session. Thank you very much, dear devotees. I think I'm also facilitating tomorrow. So I shall see you tomorrow. All glories to your service. Panchakalpa Turubhyascha. Ananta Kori Vaishnava.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Prabhupada ki jai. Gopanande.
Thank you, Prabhu, for the
Thank you,
wonderful class.
Prabhuji. Wonderful class. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you,
Thank you,
Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.